because the price of those products could be reduced. But having said that, Mr. Saito, what does it really mean? I mean, 20 years after all the WTO negotiations, finally there's one deal. But how significant really, when it comes to real terms, this deal is?
Yeah, as it was pointed out, the lowering of prices is one thing, but I think competitiveness is going to increase on both sides of the receiving end and the selling end. But what that really means is it's going to really create new innovations and so on. So obviously it'll have newer products that are available to a mass market of people. And then with this true competition, I think you're going to see a market effect to make people try harder and work, and this inevitably leads, if you look at history, innovation. It did take a long time, but as technology has progressed, this is going to be interesting to see how future things take place.
What do you think about the danger of monopoly as a result of this kind of agreement?
I don't think this deal is going to change the competitive landscape significantly. As you mentioned, the semiconductor, let's use the semiconductor industry as an example, and specifically look at the PC side of it. Today, for the PC, is Intel and AMD and provide the chips, nobody else. So with or without the deal, the competitive landscape is the same. However, today people are using less and less PCs, using a lot more on the smartphone and the tablets. If you look at that, it actually is a lot of Chinese and vendors are very competitive in the smartphone chip supplier. For example, like a Huawei's and the chip branch and Hisense, and also Spectrum, and like RDA, Rockchip, etc. There's a lot of Chinese vendors and actually are quite competitive in that area.
And as a result, you think there's no danger of monopoly?
I don't think there is a danger and for the smartphone and the tablet side of it, and I see quite a lot of competition and already.
Mr. Saito, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that monopolies used to exist when you had products that dominated the industry. But one thing that this lowering of tariff doesn't address, which is actually a good thing, is that we live now more in a world where these products can be mass sourced, and it's really software that makes a difference. So it's how you take these different products and actually create different systems and different platforms. And so when you have a dynamic system where software plays a greater role in creating innovation, it's difficult to have a monopoly on just some of the few maybe components. And even chip vendors, you know, as it was mentioned, you have Intel and AMD, but you also have mobile process vendors and you have different people coming in. So I think this day and age, when software drives it, it's very hard to hold a monopoly.
Because there was earlier story, for example, in April, the import of certain chips coming from Washington, coming from the United States, was in a way banned by the U.S. Department of Commerce, citing national security issues. Will this deal, even though it's about reducing the price, more free trade, will it also in a way cut down some of the political barriers? Go ahead.
Well, at the very, very high end, you have the high performance computing concerns, and basically some of the supercomputers can be used to simulate the testing of nuclear weapons or nuclear warheads. There's an increasing use in cryptanalysis, increasing use in design of, for instance, stealth aircraft. So there's, you know, as the defense industries learn to make better use of and better leverage high-performance computing, then you're going to see more and more restrictions on the high-performance chipsets. At the other end of the spectrum is even things like UAVs rely a lot on basically very small, very cheap IT components. So there's sort of a proliferation of both the high and low ends.
Mr. Huang, what about your answer to this? I mean, dual use is nothing new in this part of the world, or any part of the world, should I say. And therefore, the quote-unquote danger of being used militarily, will that, in a way, prevent free trade, as this specific agreement was certainly about to promote trade?
I think, for example, this year, U.S. government stopped Intel and selling Xeon, the Xeon Phi chips to China's supercomputer companies.
Tianhe too, that's
exactly
what they were talking about. They were worried about that.
Yeah. But you look at the Xeon and the Xeon Phi product, that's 100% commercial and use the product. That one has been widely used in the data center and everywhere. For the supercomputer, granted it can be used for military purpose, but they also can be used for like earthquake prediction, weather forecasting, etc. And so I think this is the wrong direction, wrong decision made by U.S. government. Ironically, if you look at the last year, Intel also sold Xeon and Xeon Phi chips to Tianhe 2 as well. Last year, there was no issue from U.S. government. However, there's somebody in China actually made a complaint about using Intel chips in Tianhe 2 for citing the national security concerns.
I see.
So I can see it appears the extremists from opposite side suddenly take the same position to oppose the same deal, to oppose a deal. Usually, I think that means probably the deal is really good.
Well, interesting. Probably you were in that position when these things happened. And that's where your decision come from, your judgment. But let me come back to you, Mr. Faith. This is a very interesting example. Does it suggest in that way, when it comes to general trend, the so-called price is not the problem anymore for free trade, but rather political barriers will in the future block all of us from doing real trade and freer trade?
At this point, it's a little bit hard to say because I think this more aggressive control of IT products is still a developing change. It's a little bit like the steel that's used, Maragene steel, which is used to make centrifuges. It has many, many sort of normal applications, but we still don't have a really good, perfect way to sort of think about how we manage that for dual use applications. And it doesn't stop people from making or trading or selling this, but it's something of concern.
Mr. Saito, your view?
Yeah, no, I think it's difficult, definitely, to enforce something that is commercially off the shelf available. I think at the same time, you also, in the whole scheme of things in the global economy, it's really a drop in the bucket. And what's really interesting about this is, ironically, the founder of Intel, Gordon Moore, this is the 50th anniversary of Moore's Law. And so if you wait 2 years, then the performance will double anyways for what's existing. So I think that just like the WTO taking a long time, these agreements, I think, are very limited time span in general anyway. And so from a global economy perspective, I think it's immaterial.